737 overruns the runway in Afghanistan, SeaTac Airport gets hacked, Boeing Starliner is failing the test. Aviation news on this episode of Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken, and the footage of the 737 taking off is coming up. But first, let's briefly talk about Boeing's latest woes. I'm only going to cover the headlines on this story because we're actually prepping for a deep dive into Starliner in the next day or two. On Saturday, August 24th, NASA announced that the two astronauts that flew the Boeing Starliner crew flight test, which launched on June 5th, will now be stranded on the International Space Station until 2025. The department heads at Boeing and NASA have reached a consensus to bring Starliner back to Earth, but deemed it too dangerous to have the spacecraft manned for the re-entry. The problem centers around overheating issues on the thrusters. The two astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, will get a ride home in 2025 on a SpaceX Dragon mission, but unfortunately their Starliner pressure suits are not compatible with Dragon. There is one suit on the ISS that fits, but not two, so the Dragon crew will bring new suits for the two astronauts. I'll go into a lot more detail in the next day or two, so watch for that video. Before we get to the dramatic takeoff of the 737 in Afghanistan, Seattle-Tacoma Airport was attacked on August 24th. At first, it was not known what had caused the outage, but an update was provided by SeaTac at 1:30 p.m. via X, stating, "Earlier this morning, the Port of Seattle experienced certain system outages indicating a possible cyber attack. The port isolated critical systems and is in the process of working to restore full service and do not have an estimated time for return." The port was able to isolate the critical systems, but delays and outages do continue. The latest update indicates that there is still no estimated time for return of services. Early Sunday morning, SeaTac posted an update. The Port of Seattle, including SCA Airport, continues to see system outages. This is not an estimated time for return, and port teams continue to work to restore full service. It is unclear if the cyber attack and the resulting outages are affecting air traffic control inside of SeaTac. This comes just a few days after Halliburton, a major U.S. oil company, announced it had detected a cyber attack on its systems, causing them to implement their cybersecurity plan, something that the major utility companies all have. While we still don't know what caused or why the suspected cyber attack occurred at SeaTac, we do know this is just the latest issue with technology and aviation, following last month's Windows Update issue with CrowdStrike, which took down several major airlines and air traffic control in hotels and all sorts of things. Micah Messer, one of our researchers, is a pilot and an IT network engineer. Here's what he had to say.
Thanks, Dan. Aviation is becoming more and more connected to the internet, and with that comes more threats. Cyber attacks like we saw with the ransomware attack on Boeing last year, and the takedown of the Liverpool airport in March of this year, and of course the denial of service attacks that happened on several Saudi Arabian airports last year. This is becoming more and more commonplace. Every major airline, airport, and aviation-related company must have cybersecurity plans in place and must harden their infrastructure. I see it all the time as a network engineer. I'm walking through an airport or a hospital. Open ports, open jacks, open switches, accessible to people who want to do harm to the company. All of these are critical to secure. We don't know exactly what occurred at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport yet, but I guarantee you this: every airport, airline, aviation company, air traffic control network, anything related to aviation needs to pay attention to this. They need to harden their infrastructure. This isn't going away. This is only going to get more and more common until we can figure out a way to protect ourselves from these attackers.
Thanks, Micah. Airports, airlines, and air traffic control need to harden their systems before something worse than what did happen occurs. Fears of what could happen if the proposed remote tower controlling or remote controlling of airlines, if that's real, the fears are real. What really concerns me is the outages this country experienced the weekend before AirVenture, the CrowdStrike. My team was affected by the Microsoft failure, and while, as far as we know, it was not a cyber attack, the result was the same. 2 different times, we reserved hotel rooms for my traveling crew, and when they showed up, the hotel clerks couldn't access their computer, and so they turned the crew away rather than put people in the empty rooms. It absolutely paralyzed the travel industry because large companies have no analog backup or no training on how to use a pencil and a ledger. Workers were unable and unwilling to work outside the box. All of this reveals incredible vulnerabilities in our culture if we only had pencils and ledgers. Hacks, ransomware, cyber attacks, they're going to continue, both from state actors and non-state actors. What will the aviation community do to protect itself? Without proper plans, backup systems, training, and protection in place, one of these attacks could lead to a horrible tragic accident, something we must work to avoid. Don't let those VOR skills atrophy. You might need to land someday when the GPS is down. Okay. In Kansas, a surprise storm hit McConnell Air Force Base at 5:30 a.m. local time on Sunday, August 25th, only lasting less than an hour, but it held 50-mile-an-hour winds, heavy rain, and lightning. Aircraft, portable toilets, and other equipment were flipped over and damaged. And due to the damage, the air show was canceled, which was scheduled to feature the Blue Angels at 3 p.m. in the afternoon local time. Local meteorologist Dean Jones said that it was a heat burst. It was reported at Dwight D. Eisenhower Airport at 7 a.m., going from 81 degrees to 93 degrees in 30 minutes. These atmospheric events were caused by a dissipating thunderstorm with dry, hot air surrounding them. Heat bursts are known to produce damaging winds of up to 80 miles an hour and jumping above 100 degrees. And this comes after 17 people were transported to the hospital yesterday, with 115 people treated for heat-related illnesses there in Kansas. Due to the high humidity and temperatures, the day before felt like 110 degrees in the area. We are, of course, praying for the victims and those who were harmed at the events. All right, an Ariana Afghan Airlines Boeing 737 smashes its tail on takeoff from the Khost Afghanistan Airport. The aircraft, a Boeing 737-400, registered as Yankee Alpha Papa India Delta, was scheduled to fly from Khost to Dubai with 110 passengers and 9 crew aboard. Video shows the aircraft taking off, struggling to get airborne, and running off the end of the runway where it struck a fence before lifting into the air, smashing its tail on the ground as it did it. Some 737-400s can have 188 passenger configuration. This one only had 110. The pilots diverted to Kabul, Afghanistan, where they landed the damaged 737 on runway 29 safely. According to reports, the aircraft sustained cracks and fractures to both mounts of the vertical stabilizer, but maintained directional control, and severe damage to the aft fuselage. It's a good thing the gear didn't come off. And due to the nature of the Khost International Airport, no NOTAMs or weather information is available at the airport. The airport is roughly 3,700 feet in elevation, with the only runway being runway 06 and 24, and it's 8,740 feet. According to Boeing, the minimum takeoff field length for a fully loaded 737-400 at sea level and 86 degrees Fahrenheit is 7,530 feet to 8,690 feet, depending on the configuration. With the airport being 3,700 feet in elevation, investigators will probably be looking at the density altitude. And for those non-pilots, the higher the altitude, the thinner the air, and the lower the lift performance. Temperature plays a big role. Density altitude is the pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperatures. On a hot and humid day, the density altitude can be a lot higher. Your plane will need longer runways. Combine that with a higher altitude airport and the effects are even greater. So the airport was located at 3,700 feet above sea level. The 737 takeoff distance at sea level and best case is around 7,500 feet, and this runway was just over 8,700 feet. We don't know how heavy the plane was loaded. But in spite of all this, maybe the big factor wasn't density altitude, but something else. I reached out to my friend, a recently retired 737 captain, Nick Kuklinski, to find out more in what he thought of the video. Nick?
Well, I'm certainly no accident investigator, but from what I could see, Dan, a couple things. The first one might be that they had an incorrect power setting for takeoff. You've got standard and then you have max. And I never flew the Dash 400, but I flew the Dash 800 in the MAX, and they had 2 or 3 actual power settings. So they may have had the incorrect power setting for takeoff, but as I looked at that again, I really don't think that was the culprit. I think the culprit and the mistake possibly could have been they had an incorrect flap setting for takeoff, or they may have completely forgot to put the flaps down at all and took off with no flaps. And that would most definitely extend the takeoff roll, which put them in the dirt and almost made a catastrophic event. So that would, I'm speculating here a little bit, but I have not seen the performance data of the airplane, but I think would be my summation of it, Dan. You look at Denver, it's a mile high, right? So it's like 5,400 feet. This was a little bit over half of that. I don't think density altitude played that much a role. I think it played part of a role of it, but I really think the culprit might be the flap setting, and it will be revealed on the air data computer.
Plenty of questions remain on why the aircraft did not take off, including thrust, flap settings. We're thankful that everyone made it safely. Well, that wraps up the news for today, and thanks to our sponsors like Z-Vision. I've got some super bright landing lights that are going on to Lola, my 210, and I can't wait to show you guys. Visit Z-Vision, xevision.com. Links to them and our other sponsors are in the description below. Keep an eye out for the deep dive into the Boeing Starliner situation in the next day or two on this channel. And if you missed it, our weekly update from last week, that video is right here. Remember, superior judgment trumps superior skill. Take care.